Hey everyone, Jess McCarthy here, reading the book Shane by Jack Schaefer. We've reached the end. We are literally at the end of this book. It's wild. Been a crazy journey, ride. Now, before I get into the last two chapters, actually, because one of them is very short. Actually, they're both pretty short. Quick recap. Shane went down to Grafton's, down to kind of the general store and also the bar, looking for Fletcher, in place of Joe, who he had hit over the head so that Joe wouldn't go down there and possibly or most likely get himself killed. Fletcher seems to be hiding. Stark Wilson basically says, "What's up?" And they get into a gunfight, and Shane kills Stark Wilson in a gunfight. The two gunned Stark Wilson. Wild. And then right afterwards, from behind, Fletcher tries to shoot Shane. Well, he really shoots him, but attempts to actually hit him, doesn't hit him. And Shane quickly, boom, kills Fletcher as well with a shot. Bob was there watching, he was just amazed. So Shane has killed both Stark Wilson and Fletcher. Clearly, there aren't going to be any more troubles for Joe and the homesteaders who Fletcher has basically tried to kill. So he tried to force them out of their own homes, off their own land. And Shane came through and helped to defend their land, their homes, their families, all of it. And that's where we left off. And Bob had watched the whole thing. And I think he had gotten taken home by another man. And that's where we're going to pick up. And we'll talk more about it at the end, but I just want to get into the action. So here we go. Father and mother were in the kitchen, almost as I had left them. Mother had hitched her chair close to father's. He was sitting up, his face tired and haggard, the ugly red marks standing out plain along the side of his head. They did not come to meet us. They sat still and watched us move into the doorway. They did not even scold me. Mother reached and pulled me to her and let me crawl into her lap as I had not done for 3 years or more. Father just stared at Mr. Weir. He could not trust himself to speak first. So Mr. Weir, brought Bob back. Your troubles are over, Start. Father nodded. You've come to tell me, he said wearily, that he killed Wilson before they got him. I know. He was Shane. Wilson, said Mr. Weir, and Fletcher. Father started. Fletcher, too? By Godfrey, yes. He would do it right. Then father sighed and ran a finger along the bruise on his head. He let me know this one thing he wanted to handle by himself. I can tell you, Weir, waiting here is the hardest job I ever had. Mr. Weir looked at the bruise. I thought so. Listen, Start. There's not a man in town doesn't know you didn't stay here of your own will. And there's a damn few that aren't glad it was Shane came into the saloon tonight. The words broke from me. You should have seen him, Father. He was. I could not find it at first. He was beautiful, Father. And Wilson, we wouldn't even have hit him if he'd been in practice. He told me so. He told you? The table was banging over as Father drove to his feet. He grabbed Mr. Weir by the coat front. My God, man, why didn't you tell me? He's alive? Yes, said Mr. Weir. He's alive, all right. Wilson got to him, but no bullet can kill that man. A puzzled, faraway sort of look flitted across Mr. Weir's face. Sometimes I wonder whether anything ever could. Father was shaking him. Where is he? He's gone, said Mr. Weir. He's gone, alone and unfollowed as he wanted it, out of the valley and no one knows where. Father's hands dropped. He slumped again into his chair. He picked up his pipe and it broke in his fingers. He let the pieces fall and stared at them on the floor. He was still staring at them when new footsteps sounded on the porch and a man pushed into our kitchen. It was Chris. His right arm was tight in the sling, his eyes unnaturally bright and the color high in his face. In his left hand, he was carrying a bottle of red cherry soda pop. He came straight in and righted the table with the hand holding the bottle. He smacked the bottle on the top boards and seemed startled at the noise he made. He was embarrassed and he was having trouble with his voice, but he spoke up firmly. I brought that for Bob. I'm a poor substitute, Start, but as soon as this arm's healed, I'm asking you to let me work for you. Father's face twisted and his lips moved, but no words came. Mother was the one who said it. Shane would like that, Chris. And still, Father said nothing. What Chris and Mr. Weir saw as they looked at him must have shown them that nothing they could do or say would help at all. They turned and went out together, walking with long, quick steps. Mother and I sat there watching Father. There was nothing we could do either. This was something he had to wrestle alone. He was so still that he seemed even to have stopped breathing. Then a sudden restlessness hit him, and he was up and pacing aimlessly about. He glared at the walls as if they stifled him and strode out the door into the yard. We heard his steps around the house and headed into the fields, and then we could hear nothing. You ever feel like that, by the way? Like you don't really want to be around other people. You just want to be alone and think about things. And I think every human being needs that, a little bit of alone time. And that's clearly what Joe is doing and needs at this moment. I do not know how long we sat there. I know that the wick in the lamp burned low and sputtered a while and went out, and the darkness was a relief and a comfort. At last, Mother rose, still holding me, the big boy bulk of me in her arms. I was surprised at the strength in her. She was holding me tightly to her, and she carried me into my little room and helped me undress in the dim shadows of the moonlight through the window. She tucked me in and sat on the edge of the bed, and then, only then, she whispered to me, "Now, Bob, tell me everything, just as you saw it happen." I told her, and when I was done, all she said in a soft little murmur was, "Thank you." She looked out the window and murmured the words again, and they were not for me, and she was still looking out over the land to the great gray mountains when I finally fell asleep. She must have been there the whole night through, for when I woke with a start, the first streaks of dawn were showing through the window, and the bed was warm where she had been. The movement of her leaving must have wakened me. I crept out of bed and peeked into the kitchen. She was standing in the open outside doorway. I fumbled into my clothes and tiptoed through the kitchen to her. She took my hand and I clung to hers, and it was right that we should be together and that together we should go find Father. We found him out by the corral, by the far end where Shane had added to it. The sun was beginning to rise through the cleft in the mountains across the river. Not the brilliant glory of midday, but the fresh and renewed reddish radiance of early morning. Father's arms were folded on the top rail, his head bowed on them. When he turned to face us, he leaned back against the rail as if he needed the support. His eyes were rimmed and a little wild. "Marin, I'm sick of the sight of this valley and all that's in it. If I tried to stay here now, my heart wouldn't be in it anymore. I know it's hard on you and the boy, but we'll have to pull up stakes and move on. Montana, maybe. I've heard there's good land for the claiming up that way." Mother heard him through. She had let go my hand and stood erect, so angry that her eyes snapped and her chin quivered. But she heard him through. Joe Start." Her voice fairly crackled and was rich with emotion that was more than anger. "So you'd run out on Shane just when he's really here to stay? But Marion, you don't understand. He's gone." "He's not gone. He's here, in this place he gave us. He's all around us and in us, and he always will be." She ran to the tall corner post, the one Shane had set. She beat at it with her hands. "Here, Joe, quick, take hold, pull it down." Father stared at her in amazement, but he did as she said. No one could have denied her in that moment. He took hold of the post and pulled at it. He shook his head and braced his feet and strained at it with all his strength. The big muscles of his shoulders and back knotted and bulged till I thought this shirt, too, would shred. Creakings ran along the rails, and the post moved ever so slightly, and the ground at the base showed little cracks fanning out. But the rails held, and the post stood. Father turned from it, beads of sweat breaking on his face, a light creeping up his drawn cheeks. See, Joe? See what I mean? We have roots here now that we can never tear loose. And the morning was in Father's face, shining in his eyes, giving him new color and hope and understanding. Chapter 16. I guess that is all there is to tell. The folks in town and the kids at school like to talk about Shane, to spin tales and speculate about him. I never did. Those nights at Grafton's became legends in the valley, and countless details were added as they grew and spread, just as the town, too, grew and spread up the river banks. But I never bothered, no matter how strange the tales became in the constant retelling. He belonged to me, to father and mother and me, and nothing could ever spoil that. For mother was right. He was there. He was there in our place and in us. Whenever I needed him, he was there. I could close my eyes and he would be with me, and I would see him plain and hear again that gentle voice. I would think of him in each of the moments that revealed him to me. I would think of him most vividly in that single flashing instant when he whirled to shoot Fletcher on the balcony at Grafton's saloon. I would see again the power and grace of a coordinate force beautiful beyond comprehension. I would see the man and the weapon wedded in the one indivisible deadliness. I would see the man and the tool, a good man and a good tool, doing what had to be done. And always my mind would go back at the last to that moment when I saw him from the bushes by the roadside just on the edge of town. I would see him there in the road, tall and terrible in the moonlight, going down to kill or be killed, and stopping to help a stumbling boy and to look out over the land, the lovely land, where that boy had a chance to live out his boyhood and grow straight inside as a man should. And when I would hear the men in town talking among themselves and trying to pin him down to a definite past, I would smile quietly to myself. For a time, they inclined to the notion, spurred by the talk of a passing stranger, that he was a certain Shannon who was famous as a gunman and gambler way down in Arkansas and Texas and dropped from sight without anyone knowing why or where. When that notion dwindled, others followed, pieced together in turn from scraps of information gleaned from stray travelers. But when they talked like that, I simply smiled because I knew he could have been none of these. He was the man who rode into our little valley out of the heart of the great glowing West, and when his work was done, rode back whence he had come, and he was Shane. And that's it. Man, Shane always gets me. I got to tell you guys, I've probably read this book probably over a dozen times. I swear. It's crazy. I love Shane. And there's that comment a couple times in these last two chapters where Bob is basically referring to him as beautiful. And it's so weird today to very rarely people refer to a man as beautiful. It's mainly women, but there's something beautiful about Shane, just his person, who he is. Anyways, I want to ask you one question at the end here. And it's, do you think Shane had to leave? I always found it interesting because we've got this, this horrible situation where somebody's trying to push Joe and his family around, but Shane, this hero, is there to help out. I mean, he's kind of heroic himself. He's just a real father, real good guy. And so is Mary in her own way. But they couldn't handle Fletcher and what he was bringing. So they had this hero, Shane, help. And he helped and he had this good time on the farm. But why did he have to go after he, ended up killing two men who basically was killing in self-defense and in defense of others? Why did he have to leave the town? I don't have a solid answer for you right now. I have my thoughts on this question, but I'm curious yours. So that's one thing I want to get out. Let me look because I wrote down a few notes. Oh, I was curious your favorite parts of the book. Two jump out to me. One is just the whole situation with the stump, and those two men going at it together. Like if you have a very good friend or somebody you just look up to and is in your own way, and he kind of looks up to you, or it's if you're two girls or you're a guy and a girl, whatever it happens to be, you just really you look up to that person and you do something together that's magnificent. I love that stump situation when they both attack that stump and get at it. And then what the cherry on top with that is when Marion then goes and makes or deals with her own stump. When Shane said, "This is the best stump I've ever had," talking about the apple pie. I just thought that was wonderful. Um, and I've heard some people say, "Oh, the woman's in the kitchen making her apple pie and the men are out there doing man." It's like, you know what? Her making that apple pie was just as important as them getting that stump out the ground. And I think Shane, said that right again by calling it a stump. So that's one thing. Um, the second thing is just Shane overall, man. The guy he's so sweet, but also so badass at the same time, right? I think I had some quote that, oh yeah, Joe tells Marion, he's dangerous, all right, but not to us. That's Shane. He's just he's so much trouble to bad guys or bad girls or bad people, but to good people, this is like the man you want by your side, and I love it. uh I mean, I've mentioned this many times, but Shane is he's my hero. I think I've noted it in the headings a few times. um there is one story I want to tell you briefly. So the first time I ever read this book was way back in the days. I think it was 2006, 15, 16 years ago, who knows, about there. And I was so excited. We had this family dinner out. I think I was reading or I just read it. And there was maybe like 12, 15 family members over. And I wanted to ask everybody at the table, like, hey, has anybody read this book, Shane? I love it. And I mentioned it. And then my grandpa, who always was a kind of loud talker, talked about politics, yelled about this, he's a good guy, but he's just loud guy. He goes quiet and this look on his face like he's looking off into the distance, and he really was. And he just says, "Don't go, Shane." My grandpa was like 80 something years old, maybe even in his 90s at that point, and he's looking off. He looked like a little child in that moment, and he says, "Don't go, Shane." And my grandpa was not like a super emotional guy who's going to share his emotions. And he remembered all the way back. I think it was the movie, because there's a movie called Shane. It's pretty good too. I'd recommend it. It's based off the book. In that movie, Bob says at the end when Shane decides to leave, "Don't go, Shane." And my grandpa, he must have been 34. He said afterwards, it must have been 30, 40 years since he had seen that movie. He remembered it that vividly. So an 80, 90-year-old man could have a hero like Shane looking up to him. And it just brought back all that emotion that kind of I've had throughout reading this book, and maybe you have as well. Um, so yeah, we want Shanes in our lives. Oh, and one thing I wanted to do, I wanted you to meet my family, because Joe's got his family, Marion and Bob. I've got my wife, her name's Alessandra, and our new child, who I think I showed you a picture before, but Ragnar. So hold on one second. I'm gonna see if I can grab him. Well, this is my boy. Oh, he's like, what is going on? He's not usually looking at the screen, so he's probably like, what in the heck? But this is Ragnar. He's like, what is that? And this is my wife, Alessandra.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, so I just wanted you guys to see them, my own little crew. And my wife. Anyways, that was it. You want to take Ragnar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for saying hi, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Adios. That's my family. That is my lovely, lovely family. And let me think if there was anything else. Oh yeah, face. So we got to do a face. And I wish, it's so nice to have kids around or other people around when we're reading because then they can say which face they want. But since you guys aren't here, face. Let's do Joe when he realizes that Marion helps him to see that Shane is still there with them in some way, kind of in spirit. He's all around them. So let's do that face when Joe kind of comes to that realization, that aha moment. Oh, yeah, he's not fully gone, you know? That's my face. Curious yours. Um, what do I have? Let me just look. I want to make sure I got things right. It's the last one here. So, one last question for you. Do you have any heroes in your life like Shane? I mean, it could be your father, it could be a friend, could be somebody in the movies, could be who knows who, your science teacher, I don't know. But do you have somebody that you look up to like Shane or kind of a real life hero? I think it's important to have these. If you don't, search, find somebody because, man, I mean, if you have a hero, you already know you're looking up to them. It's something else when you can kind of look up to somebody and be like, man, I want to be like that person. And then, as I think they said in the book, to keep a boy straight when he's growing up, like going along the right path. You're moving up, growing into a strong human being, man, woman, whatever you happen to be. Um, find a hero if you don't have one. That's all I got for you. That's the only thing I'm going to tell you to do. Otherwise, I hope you think more about this book. I hope you enjoyed the whole read aloud. I enjoyed doing it. Apologies for, I think there's 2 times where I missed it. Sometimes make some mistakes, then we just apologize. Anyways, good times being with you all. Reach out if you need anything ever. JESSE at jessymccarthy.com. I think that's the email I gave you guys. You can find me if you really want to chat with me. All right, everyone, you take care. Adios.